Hello, and welcome to our second part of the five-part training on rapid rehousing, reducing homelessness using a rapid rehousing approach. My name is Kay Mosier McDivitt, and I'm a Capacity Building Associate with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. I'm going to be narrating the second part of the training series, the Housing Search, Location, and Landlords, which will focus on how to identify and recruit landlords to rent to your clients, as well as how to develop good landlord relationships. A member of the Center for Capacity Building team will be narrating each part of this training series. And in addition to narrating the slides, we will talk about interactive activities that are available on our website to help communities get a better grasp of the content we're reviewing. This module has 2 activities built into it. When we do come to a place where it makes sense to do an activity, we will let you know and explain the activity. If you choose to do the activity at that time, please pause the training after you have listened to the instructions and then resume it once you have completed this activity. Alternatively, feel free to do the activities on your own time after listening to the entire training. If you have any questions about this training or about rapid rehousing in general, please feel free to send them to thecenter@naeh.org. Okay, let's get started. Before I get started on the landlord module, I want to again review what rapid rehousing is to make sure that we're all on the same page. We took this definition of rapid rehousing from the Emergency Solutions Grant regulations, which have gone into effect. The Emergency Solutions Grant is the new version of what was formerly known as the Emergency Shelter Grant Program before the HEART Act was enacted. The Emergency Solutions Grant includes funding for prevention and rapid rehousing activities, in addition to the more traditional shelter activities. The new ESG regulations define rapid rehousing as including the provision of housing relocation and stabilization services and short and or medium-term rental assistance as necessary to help a homeless individual or family move as quickly as possible into permanent housing and achieve stability in that housing. If we're going to successfully then implement rapid rehousing, it's really important to focus on developing good landlord partnerships. So let's start talking about how to build these landlord relationships a bit more. Your landlord relationships are important to help clients access housing. When you think about it, without having landlords, you're not going to have very many housing options. As you think about building your landlord relationships, it is important to refer back to the information that was covered in the first module on housing assessment barriers. Building these landlord relationships is going to depend on having good identification of your clients' housing barriers to be able to find the right landlords and the right fit that are able to work with you and your clients to address those barriers. Most of you will need to balance client advocacy and support with meeting the needs of your landlord partners. In addition, building strong partnerships with one landlord almost always means that he or she will refer other landlords to your program. Increasing your effectiveness starts with understanding landlords' core business needs. So landlords have basically 4 fundamental business concerns, and we're now going to cover those business concerns. So first, landlords want to know that they're going to get paid on time. Landlords often have low profit margins, and so a late rental payment can cause a lot of severe financial problems for a landlord, especially if they're carrying a large mortgage on their buildings. So one of the things you're going to think about when recruiting landlords is how your program is going to help the landlord get their rent paid on time. The role that the program, the case manager plays is to help the client understand the importance of this. You're going to work with your client to help them develop a budget to make sure they pay their rent on time, and you're going to avoid being late. However, on some rare occasions, if a crisis occurs, one of the advantages of working with a program is that you're going to be able to notify the landlord ahead of time, and you're also going to be there to work with the client to remedy the situation. Secondly, landlords like stable renters. The cost of advertising fees and vacancy expenses can all be avoided the longer a good tenant stays in a unit. In addition, your program can also help fill vacancies, and that helps the landlord reduce advertising expenses. What some providers have even done now is become primary leasing agents for particular landlords. What they do is use their capacity to fill vacancies quickly in all of a landlord's units. And then by working with clients to help them become long-term renters, these become primary marketing tools when recruiting landlords. Remember that the responsibility of your program and case managers is to partner with your client to create long-term tenancies. Some programs do this by offering tenancy training to all of your clients that you house. And in that training, you want to focus on things like paying rent on time, identifying issues that force tenants to move involuntarily, and just helping tenants understand terms of a lease. This doesn't mean that a client has to stay forever. Clients have the same choice as everybody else to move from a unit if it no longer suits them. But when a client does move and the landlord has enjoyed a positive experience with your program and with that client, and then again, you're going to be able to quickly fill that unit with another tenant, which reduces their costs. This is going to help create a really good working relationship with that landlord. And that in turn is going to be a really major selling point when you recruit other landlords. So remember, marketing your program's ability to quickly fill units with new tenants when a vacancy occurs, and identifying how that can save landlords significant turnover and advertising costs for their units is a major tool to use in selling your program. The third thing that landlords don't want is disruptive tenants. Things like loud noise, suspicious visitors, frequent phone calls. These are the types of things that all landlords seek to avoid. If these problems persist, other tenants will complain and the landlords may have to evict your client. And as you know, evictions are expensive and a landlord can even be fined for problems caused by a tenant. So being a good neighbor is a critical tenant skill. Again, as you design your program, think about the tools that you can provide to your clients to help them learn to be a good neighbor. Skills that in turn will help you market your program to landlords. This topic of being a good neighbor is another key component that you want to add to the tenancy training that I mentioned earlier that you're providing to your clients. Finally, landlords want to know that their units are going to be maintained in good condition. Landlords want to avoid the expenses associated with preventable property damage, and you're going to often work with landlords who even use their personal accounts to cover the expenses, so any damage or excessive repairs can really cause a lot of financial difficulties for particular landlords. So this is one of the key things that landlords are often worried about, particularly if your program has a lot of clients that have poor rental histories. How is their unit going to be maintained? They want to know what's going to happen if the property is damaged, how they're going to be able to pay for it. So this is really important to think about when you're creating incentives in your program. What can you offer that will help landlords rent to your clients, particularly for programs that are working with clients that have high housing barriers? Some examples that programs use include establishing a contingency fund in the event that a client would cause significant damage to a unit, or others offer 2 months security deposit to landlords in case there are damages. These types of incentives will help leverage landlords' willingness to work particularly with those high barrier households, and will help you really sell your program if you can talk to them about ways that you can cover those things. As I mentioned when I started, knowing these core components and these core concerns will help you create a program and incentives that can build strong landlord relationships, and that's also going to give you an advantage when seeking new landlord partners. Remember that the housing stability services and the rental subsidy that are part of your rapid rehousing program are already built in, and use these specific tools to address these concerns that landlords have. For those of you who will be doing the interactive activities with this training, now is the time to do the first activity for this module called the Landlord Incentive Activity. This exercise will help you create a plan to engage landlords with the goal of convincing them to rent to households experiencing homelessness in your program. So if you think back to your barriers assessment tool and the other concerns that you now know landlords in your community may have, think about the incentives that your program can offer that would engage landlords to rent to your clients and address their concerns. As you see in the worksheet, there are 2 questions. First, begin by listing 5 incentives that you could offer to landlords, from the most expensive to the least expensive. And once you list those incentives, go on to question 2, which tells you to determine the potential resources and funding for these specific incentives. This is the first step to beginning your landlord recruitment process. If you actually already have a robust landlord engagement strategy in your community, use these questions to think about how you might improve or come up with some new ideas. When we do this activity in training, we typically give people about 10 minutes to complete it. So if you choose to do the activity now, pause the training and restart it when you are ready to continue. So now we're going to talk about how you can leverage the information we've covered to bring new landlords into your partner base. Finding landlords to work with your program can feel really challenging at first, but by using some targeted strategies, it does become easier. Cold calling is the most common method that you can use for finding landlords. Start by generating a list of people that you may already know that are landlords or that may be able to connect you with landlords. You might want to talk to folks both in your personal and professional circles to find out if they know of landlords. Most of us have some kind of connections to someone who is a landlord or someone who knows a landlord. And so starting with who you know is always a good first step. And then next, you want to keep adding to your list, so look for listings in your local paper. A lot of communities have local weekly papers that private landlords list properties in. Include listings from for rent signs and other rental publications that might be available. One of the things you might want to do is have everyone in your organization keep an eye out for potential rent signs that can be added to your list, or to identify landlords that they may know of. You also may want to use websites such as Craigslist.com. So then when you first call, make sure that you're ready to tell the landlord who you are, tell about your organization, your program, and how your organization helps clients find housing. If your organization is well known in your community, make sure you're really building that reputation. You can start making your cold calls looking for a specific unit for a specific client, or you can also just start making cold calls to build your resources and your landlord partnerships. The next thing you might want to work on is direct mailing marketing. This is a good way to reach landlords. Simply combine a flyer or a brochure from your organization and add it with a personalized letter to a landlord. So the letter could describe the benefits of partnering with your organization, or you might want to describe a particular client's needs or client's success story. One of the things you might also want to do is include a quote from a landlord who's worked with your program. One of the advantages of direct mailing is that you could easily reach a large number of landlords at one time. Another thing is that you might want to attend a landlord network meeting. You can find out about these meetings in your community by contacting local landlord or realtor associations, or sometimes calling your local county housing programs. When you attend, make sure you have brochures or flyers that you can leave with interested landlords, and always make sure you have a lot of business cards to hand out and do a lot of networking. Remember that this meeting is also an opportunity for you to talk to landlords and learn more about their concerns, their needs, and the issues that they are most concerned about in their community. So if there is not a local landlord association in your community, or even if there is, you may want to hold a small meeting of your own and host it at your organization. This gives your potential landlords a chance to actually come to your organization and learn more about what you do. You want to include a presentation about your program. You want to include in your presentation things about the clients you serve, a little bit about your current partnerships that you have with other landlords. If you can have a landlord actually attend your meeting and talk to the other landlords, that's a really good tool to use. Some programs even bring clients into meetings to talk to landlords and share their stories with them, and they find that's a good way to generate interest in the program. And finally, word of mouth referrals is a great way to gain landlord partners. Really, landlords are often more likely to work with your program if there's an existing partner or someone else in the community that they trust who can describe a positive experience about your program. So get the word out about your program and all the great work you're doing with landlords. You may want to feature an article in your organization's newsletter. Why not do a presentation at your organization's board meeting so all your board members can hear about this and perhaps help you? You might want to add information to your website. Some websites actually have a special section just for landlords where they can post their properties on, and that site can also share needs that you have or stories from other landlords. Using social networking is great. Twitter, Facebook pages, keep posting needs that you have, certain units you're looking for, and success stories about what you've been doing in your program. As you continue to build a great relationship and reputation among landlords, other landlords that learn about your program through these word of mouth referrals may start calling you when they have vacancies. So, in essence, it becomes a win win for everyone. Your program also may have connections to a faith based community, and that's a great place to find landlords and get out word of mouth, give presentations or get things put in church bulletins. Or if there's substance abuse recovery programs that landlords already work with them, then these landlords are often willing to house tenants who need a second chance. Now that we've covered what landlords want and how to build landlord incentives in your program, and also ways that you can think about recruiting landlords, one of the things we want to talk about is a key position in rapid rehousing programs. It's going to be important that you have someone on staff that takes responsibility for being the housing locator. Some programs incorporate this role into the case management role, while other programs delegate this responsibility to a specific position. There can be advantages and disadvantages to each model, but both can work well as long as you have staff that have key qualities and abilities to fill this role. So, some of the key things to think about when identifying who in your program can play this role are the key qualifications that a housing locator position should have in a rapid rehousing program. So, you need someone that can be a really good salesman and a mediator. It's also important that this person has a good understanding of tenancy and landlord issues. If someone has a background in housing and knows landlord language, it's really important to remember that when you're talking to a landlord, you're using very different language than when you're talking to your clients. You need somebody that's very personable, somebody that is easy to build relationships. Someone with a sales or realty background can be very beneficial in this program, and just in general, a people skills person. Building relationships with landlords is just like building relationships with anybody else. In essence, this person in this role really needs to understand the four needs of landlords that we covered earlier. It needs to be somebody that can connect the right client with the right housing and the right landlords, and really will understand the different tools that will be needed to leverage housing specific to the housing barriers or needs of different clientele. The final thing that we want to cover is the role that a client plays in the housing location process. While the program has the responsibility to recruit and incentivize landlords to partner with the program, it is critical to develop a broad and diverse landlord base with diverse housing options and rental options for effective programs. Because each household you serve has a lot of different barriers and different needs, you really need to have a diverse landlord base with options to meet all those different needs. For example, most programs find that it's easier to work with private landlords who often can be more flexible in eligibility requirements for high barrier households, while other low barrier households might be better served through housing complexes. Offering a variety of choice is important. Consumer driven also means that the client has a say in where they live from the beginning of the search process. You want to include the client. The housing specialist should be able to identify several options that meet the needs of the client where the household can live. So we suggest that at minimum you should identify 2 to 3 potential options for the client so that they are able to make their choice. It's also important to engage the client in finding their housing. In fact, we often find that clients are a really good source for bringing new landlords into the pool of landlords who are willing to work with your program. Clients should also be encouraged to compare their options. So in this slide, you're going to see a tool that you can provide to your clients to help them compare their options. You help them think about what kind of neighborhood they want, the amenities they want, how many rooms do they need to meet the needs of their family, and depending on what the needs of their family are, what's the kind of proximity they need to their support system, their schools, their friends, and their family, etc. This particular tool you can defined as part of our module, and it's there for you to use with your clients that they could do a comparison between the 2 to 3 units that you identify for them. The final activity for this training module is a landlord recruitment activity. This exercise is designed to help you create a plan to identify and begin to recruit landlords to work with your program. So first, we suggest you identify 4 to 5 different techniques that you plan to use to recruit landlords. For example, for cold calls, what would be the first thing you do to start adding people to your list? Then once you identify those techniques, move to the second section and create a plan to implement your landlord recruitment process. The next step chart helps you identify your target for each technique, then identify who specifically in your organization will be responsible for that target, and then set a timeline within the next 30 days for each of these to occur. This activity then will conclude part 2 of our training, Reducing Homelessness with a Rapid Rehousing Approach. The next part of our modules and our training will be as follows. A part on subsidies, which will discuss how to build and fund subsidies within your program, models for providing those subsidies, and how to make adjustments to household subsidies if necessary. A piece on supportive services, which will talk about how and where to provide services effectively under a rapid rehousing model. And a final piece on outcomes, which explores data supporting the effectiveness of rapid rehousing and also provides community examples that have successfully implemented the rapid rehousing model. We hope you'll join us for these remaining 3 parts. And if you did not view the first part on defining rapid rehousing and creating a housing barriers assessment process, that you will take the time and opportunity to view that module as well. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to send them to thecenter@naeh.org. Thanks for your time.